All right, so I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Pam. Pam, it's been great having you here. I'm so thankful that that you came because I know that you're very busy back at BERNINA, and it's a long time coming to get you back here. I thought after I heard you left Baby Lock, it was a secret, and I didn't know that you were at BERNINA. So welcome back to our world.
Thank you. Good to be back in this part of the world again. Okay, so any questions from the last few days? Yes. Okay. Yeah.
What you did with the ruffle down the middle
Yeah.
was that the ruffle foot?
No, it was the chain stitch foot. So we'll talk about more ruffles and chain stitching and things like that. Chain stitch foot, because, and we'll talk about feet, because here it is. And if I lose words today, just shout out the one you think it might be, okay? And if I'm looking for something and you see it on the table, go, there it is, okay? Because some of you were not here yesterday, but you had the mound of stuff that we end up with. So here's, perfect, look at Roz, she is right on the ball here. So the difference when we were looking at, do I have a ruffle in the middle of anything out here right now?
Talking about needle sounds, are there specific needles you recommend?
I'm going to talk about that next, okay? So the foot that we have here on the right is the standard presser foot, okay? And you can see that it has that extra piece that's on the right-hand side of the foot. The chain and cover stitch foot is that little skinny foot. So if you're stitching over seams with a cover stitch, it makes it easier and your hem or seam will not get caught on that extra outside edge. When you're doing ruffles or sewing down the middle of a piece of fabric to create a ruffle, again using this chain stitch foot will allow that fabric to feed in better.
What number is that?
13, and it comes with your machine. It's in the little small box. Okay? All right. So, any other questions? You had a question?
It's about safety stuff.
Okay. All right. So,
Universal if I have a baby lock serger.
so this C, well, it's numbered out for the BERNINA, a C13. The baby lock, it will be called a chain and cover stitch foot. Okay? Yes. Okay? So you can purchase that separately. Alrighty. Now, the question about needles. Okay? That's a needle, right? So it's so much easier to see this. Now, this is from their store. So this is always in their store. I want to get one of these, but I can't travel with it. Right? Certainly not a carry-on. If they don't let me on with the scissors, they certainly wouldn't let me on with this. And TSA would probably look at me very strangely. But
Tell them it's a knitting needle.
it's a knitting needle. Yeah, well, yeah, it could be. It could be. But the reason that I pulled this out, and the reason that I do want to talk about needles for just a little bit, is because there is that question. Do I always have to use a serger needle with my serger? Okay? So I bring this because when you look at, and there is a difference. There is a difference between a household sewing machine needle and a serger needle. Okay? And the way that, and seriously, if you ever go to a show or at Sew Expo, or Sew Fair, if they have, I would encourage them to bring in Rhonda Pierce because she does an absolutely wonderful needle presentation and talks all about, if you don't have the Schmetz Needle app on your phone or device, download the Schmetz Needle app because that will really give you more information about the right needle and the kind of needles and what fabrics you should use with what kind of needles. Okay, so that's wonderful, and and there's also a booklet. But looking at this needle, there is, of course, the part that goes into your the shaft, okay? That's from here to here. Then there's a long groove that runs down the front of the needle. And of course, then you have the eye. And different needles have different shaped eyes. That's why a metallic needle will have a different shaped eye. And if you don't use the right needle, when you use metallic thread, that's many times when you get the shredding of your thread, okay? The difference then in a serger needle, because this is a household sewing machine needle, it's going to be completely round on the back, okay? With a serger needle, you have that same long groove that you have in the front, you also have on the back of your needle, okay? Now, the biggest time that you're going to find that it would really be essential for, this is the official term, for optimal stitch results, you would place and it is important when you're doing chain and cover stitch, if there are any skip stitches that you would have, you may have a universal. You may have a standard sewing machine needle in your machine, and by putting in the number that is ELX705 on the package is going to give you that overlock needle, okay? Now, you have basically two different sizes of needles for overlock. You have 12s and 14s. Can you use something smaller? Yes, but you don't want to use anything smaller than a size 10, okay? Nothing smaller. Because when the stitch, and I'll have to see if I can find it on my computer and Roz can pull it up, but the way that the stitches are formed, and all of you have sergers or no? Anybody know? Okay, so when I say loopers are like a pair of knitting needles inside of your serger, and they cross and the needle comes through that loop, and that's what forms your stitch. So when your needle is too small, it's too far away from those loopers, so it's not going to catch, okay? Conversely, you don't want to go any bigger than a size 14, okay? Because the sergers are timed when they come from the factories. They are timed with a size 14 needle. And if you put a needle in that's bigger, you could push it to a 16, but you would never want to go any bigger than that. But what's going to happen is that then your loopers are going to hit your needle, and you'll hear that ticking sound, okay? How often should we change our serger needles?
After every major project.
Yeah. When you change your needles, sometimes when I was mentioning about that ticking sound, right? Sometimes also, if you work with a sewing machine that you have to help your fabric through, you have a tendency to kind of pull on your fabric a little bit. If you ever hear a ticking sound on your serger, the first thing I want you to do is put your fabric in front of your presser foot, put your hands up, step on your foot pedal, and let the fabric feed through by itself, okay? If you do that and you don't hear that ticking sound, guess what? It's you, okay? It's you pulling on that fabric, right? And you have to keep in mind that your serger feed dogs, if you can zoom in there, Roz, your serger feed dogs are twice, almost 3 times as long as what your sewing machine feed dogs are going to be. So whenever you're feeding fabric, no matter if it's a knit fabric, or if it's a woven fabric, or if it's a thick fabric, or if it's a quilting cotton, you're going to have, the machine has control of it. You don't have to control it. So the other day when we were talking about quilting, I personally find that I can piece straighter and better than I can on a sewing machine, because my feed dogs here are holding that fabric for a longer period of time. and it doesn't wiggle around. And if you're, driving along and on your machine and somebody walks in and says, hey, and you do this, you veer off your fabric, right? So it does give you better control. All right, now let's then talk about, so we've talked about needles as far as standard ELX 705 needles, okay? I also have used these with my embroidery machine. So if you have a embroidery design that is really dense, right? And you end up with shredding of your thread, okay? Remember, this needle has that groove on the front and on the back. So now the thread is going to fall into those little grooves, into that long groove, and it's going to kind of protect the thread as it goes in and out those many times. Fun fact, did you know that your thread goes in and out of your needle at least 7 or 8 times before it actually lays on the fabric? Yeah, it goes in and out a lot of times. That's why it's important to have a good needle and good thread, and especially when you're working on fabrics that might have some abrasion to them. Now with a serger, as it feeds in, it goes right onto the fabric. It's not having to go up and down and in and out. It goes right onto the fabric as soon as it comes through the machine. Okay? All right, so then let's take a look at, but then what happens if you're working with a really, oh, this is a good one. So let's say you're working with this really fine knit, okay? You're working with a really fine knit, and if you work with you want to probably use a ballpoint needle or a jersey needle. Now you might go, well, they don't say ELX 705 on them, okay? You can use ballpoint needles in your machine. You may need to sew just a little bit slower if you see that there are any stitching inconsistencies, okay? Lengthen your stitch will also help in that as well. And also you can back off on your thread control a little bit if you see that the stitch is pulling too tight, okay? So that would be ballpoint needles. Then you also have a microtex needle. So if you're sewing on fabrics that are really dense, outdoorsy type fabrics, or bra fabric, okay? Those kinds of fabrics that have a very dense weave to them, you would want to use a microtex needle. And again, you can, and it has a much sharper point on that needle, okay? So that point is also going to help penetrate through those fabrics as it's going to form your stitch. And that will also help prevent skip stitches, because if your needle deflects off of your fabric and it doesn't pierce and penetrate, the looper cannot pick up that stitch, okay? So those are some other needles, okay? Yes. So, yeah, so that most of the needles have 80 by 12. Okay, so the European sizing is always the front number, and the back number is the American sizing on the needle itself, which is, I think a lot of us are more familiar now with the combination of numbers. But if you've been sewing for a while, you are probably still thinking about 12s, 14s, 16 numbers. Okay? All right.
With microtex, you should use an 80.
Huh?
An 80, size 80 microtex.
I just pulled this off the wall. They come in various sizes. Yeah. But you're also going to find that you can use a smaller size needle on your serger. You don't have to use as big of a needle. Okay? All right? Yes. Question?
Like, a 14 is bigger than a 12.
Yes, ma'am.
Not like a shotgun.
No. The bigger the or wire
When
or
you do the needles that go on bigger the number, the smaller the needle, you know, in the hospital. Not just to confuse everybody.
Yeah, yeah, you're exactly right. It has, on needles,
They're
the
normal.
bigger,
The number, the bigger the needle.
yeah. Yeah, Fran. These are all sewing machine needles. Yeah,
So when do you use Serger? Isn't there a specific needle for Serger?
there is. Yeah, there is. But that was the first package. But what what I'm saying is that you can use all of these other needles. You're not limited to just that one needle. If you're working with different kinds of fabrics, you may want to use some of these other types of needles also. Okay? Yeah.
So the size limitations you mentioned for the ELX
Mm-hmm.
needles, are they true for ballpoint?
Yes.
And Microtex, you should stay within that range?
Yes, the sizing of the needles, no matter what kind it is, you should stay within that range. Okay? You should stay within that range. Okay? 10 to 14.
And that's the same for the baby lock
Yep.
chargers as well.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Now, you're going to find, and what you're going to find is that these, of course, are all household sewing machine needles. Some older model sergers have industrial needles, okay? So if you have a machine that uses an industrial needle, I'm sure Janice would be happy to talk to you about that. But, yeah, but that's a whole different conversation, okay? All right. Then you have the top stitching needles. And these are the needles that when we're working, and we're going to be talking about decorative embellishment applications coming up. These are the ones that I use most often as a different kind of needle in my machine, okay? Because when we start working with 12 weight threads or 8 weight threads in our needle, we need a bigger eye, okay? When I'm going to be putting those heavy threads or multiple threads through the needle, you need to have that bigger eye, okay? Now, do they say ELX 705 on them? No, they don't. Will I be using them with my chain and cover stitch and overlock at times? Yes, okay? When I sew with my top stitching needles in my chain and cover stitch, may I sew a little bit slower? Yes, okay? So those are all some things. Now, I am trying to talk with some of the needle companies to make us a top stitching needle that is an ELX needle. Okay? So send your cards and letters to schmetz.com. Yes, question.
Okay, so I've been confused about the thread. Now, the 12 weight is heavier than a 40 weight, right?
Yeah. So yes.
Okay.
So then, any other questions on needles? Yeah.
That package said professional grade. What's the difference?
Okay. So partially yes. Marketing was the answer up front, and partially yes, but also you have chrome. All right. And I did in some of these packages, I did bring specifically the chrome versus standard. Okay. Now there are some that I always say there are certain things that you can let go. If let's say you're working on a project, you have to get it done by morning, it's midnight, Janice's store isn't open, you're down to one needle and it doesn't say chrome on it, do you have to wait? No. No. Chrome, yeah. The chrome finish is going to make your needle last longer, technically, but does that mean you shouldn't be changing your needle as often? Because what happens also is the chrome covering that's on it, when your needle breaks, it like splinters sometimes. That chrome finish will also not break it into a bunch of little pieces. Okay, it'll just kind of break it in half. Okay, so the chrome finish is there to
Like safety glass in a car.
kind of like it, yeah. But it isn't that it is absolutely necessary. Yeah.
What are organ needles?
What are organ? A different brand. So there are brands, just like there are brands of machines, there are different brands of needles. Okay? You'll find that in the BERNINA machines, there's what's considered a BERNINA brand. Okay? It is Schmetz. Okay? But BERNINA, because Schmetz and BERNINA have a relationship, they package these Schmetz needles with the BERNINA. But BERNINA is the only company that Schmetz packages their needles in without their name on them. Okay, so Organ is a completely different company. Okay, and Class A, that's another brand too.
You use BERNINA needles in a baby lock machine?
Yeah, it's the same. It's Schmetz. It's a Schmetz needle, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
What was the answer to how often you change your needles?
Do you want me to tell you what I do or what you should do? So really, you should change your needle, especially a serger needle, because keep in mind that your sergers will sew 1,500 stitches a minute, up to. Not that you have to always sew that fast, but it's moving really fast up and down through that fabric. So I would recommend that you change your needle after every major project, right? And especially now, here's the other thing. Needles, yes. If you are sewing, the majority of your sewing that you do is a natural fiber. And this pretty much carries over to sewing machines too. If you're sewing mostly through natural fibers, your needles are going to last longer. Okay? If you're sewing through man-made fibers, or you're sewing through that thicker foamy stuff, right? Then you probably would need to change a little more frequently. Okay? Please don't wait until your needles break to change them, because that's stressed. Your needle is then stressed. And also, if you, again, hear that ticking sound, and you did hands up and let it go, and you still hear ticking, change your needle. Yeah. And also, if you don't remember the last time you changed your needle, change your needle. Yeah. And if your stitches are not even and they're just skipping all the time, change your needle, and that will solve many, many problems. So years ago, and you know, when you look at a needle, the eye of the needle is really not too far from the point of the needle. So years ago, I was working at a store, and someone brought their machine in, and they said, well, she came to pick up her machine, and he said, oh, and I changed the needle. She goes, you did what? Well, I changed the needle. And she brought it in because it was skipping stitches. And he goes, well, I changed the needle. And then she said, you did what? And he goes, yeah, I changed the needle. And she goes, I've had the same needle in that machine since I bought it. And what she would do is she would take the emery board and file it down. So it was filed down so far she couldn't even, there was no eye left anymore. She couldn't thread her needle anymore. So don't wait that long when you're threading your changing your needles. Yes.
So, depending upon the weight of the thread, is that what you change your size of your needles for?
So, depending upon the size of the thread, will that be, yeah, she's asking, depending upon the size of the thread, would that be the size of the needle that I would be using? If I'm putting a heavy thread in my needle, then yes. But if I am just using a standard overlock or sewing thread, because you don't have to use overlock thread in your machine. If you're using, making one hot pink garment, you can get the small spools, right, and use that. But also, when you're going to work with regular threads, it's more about the weight of the fabric that you're working with than it is the weight of your thread,
So like,
most typically.
the reason I ask is not a serger machine question, but
Yeah.
like on my embroidery machine, when I'm using that metallic thread,
Then sergers and sewing machine are different in that respect. So if you're
my embroidery machine.
yeah, so if you're working with a heavier thread in your embroidery, then yes, use a different size needle or a metallic needle which has a different shaped eye in it.
There is,
Metallic,
what if they make those for the industrial machines?
I don't know
I
that.
have to look.
Yeah, the techs would know that for sure. Okay, somebody had another, oh, the question was about thread. So the other day, remember we talked about our weight of thread? We weren't? Okay, so when we talk about weights of thread, it is opposite than the needles. So your smaller number thread is a thicker thread. Now, there is a great video out there that Wonderfil has done, and it's called The Sausage Theory of Thread. Okay? So the sausage theory of thread is this. So it's getting close to summertime, and you're going to have people over for a picnic. And we're going to use hamburgers instead of sausages. So you have a pound of hamburger, and you know that you're going to have 5 people coming over. So you divide it up into 5, and then your son or your husband says, I'm going to bring 2 more friends over. So what do you have to do? You have to take that same amount of meat and you have to make more burgers so your burgers become smaller. Okay? So they take the same amount of fiber, and if they're making an 8-weight thread, it's going to be bigger around. If they're making a 80-weight thread, they pull it out and it makes it much thinner. Okay? So if you're interested in seeing that little video, wonderfil.com, it's really entertaining and it really helps you understand more about the threads. So when we take a look at some of these threads though, you're going to find, and you all have a really, really good selection of decorative serger threads here, whether you know that or not. Many places that I go to, they don't. They don't have the variety of threads. So one of them is going to be this one, which is called Pearl Crown Rayon. And this Pearl Crown Rayon, obviously, is a rayon thread. And it has a twist to it that is like you might have used pearl cotton, right? And you see it on those little balls, right? So Pearl Crown Rayon is a very nice rayon thread. It has a very nice pearlized twist to it. And when you work with it, because it is twisted, it will not pill. So a lot of times rayon threads, if you have an edge, the abrasion that you have on an edge will start to kind of pill or fray a little bit. And this type of thread will not. And this can be found in the serger area on the top shelf, where all the feet are, okay? Huh? Pearl Crown Rayon. What weight is it? This is like a 12 weight, okay? No, Pearl Crown Rayon comes in this one weight. This you can use in the needle with a top stitching needle, okay? In the serger, okay? Any 12-weight thread you can also use in your sewing machine in the needle. Huh? Oh, yes, so you could use this on you could use it with a rolled hem. So let me show you the 8-weight thread. Let me see if I have one open. So your needle, you would use a top stitch needle, okay? This is an 8-weight thread. Okay? So the thread itself is thicker. Okay? It's thicker, and this is called, I always get it mixed up, this is dazzle. Okay? This is dazzle. I highly, if you've not used decorative thread before at all, I would highly recommend that you start with a 12-weight thread. Okay? Everybody loves this 8-weight thread to start with, and then you frustrate yourself, and then guess where this goes? Drawer. Okay? Or the trash. Okay? Or you give it to a friend.
Doesn't matter, is it the cover stitch location of the needle or it's top stitch location of the needle? I'm not talking about type of the needle, I'm talking about type of the stitch.
The eyes or the
Type of the stitch you're doing with that,
weight of thread?
yes.
No, because you can use 8-weight, 12-weight in, or a blending of any of these in a cover stitch or in an overlock stitch. Okay, both. Yes.
In what part of the package of the thread can you see what is the weight of the thread?
Okay, so where can you see the weight of the thread on the package? Okay, but here's also another thing. It can say 12-weight and it'll be heavier. It'll say 8-weight and it will be even heavier. But each thread company will also vary just a little bit from type to type, okay?
Where does the number come from? Is it like this much is a
I think it's by
pounds or
yeah, grams or something. Yeah,
how do they come up with this number?
it could also be, not that these threads are extruded, but so if you make, I think about years ago when I would help my mom at home and she had one of those little grinders and you had those different sized holes, or you're making spaghettis or whatever, noodles, extruder, and you can put that on and the different size holes will indicate the size or diameter, okay, of that thread. Okay, so back to our threads. So where does it say? So typically it's on a tube, it's going to say on the end,
Right on the very end there. Yeah, here.
okay, yeah, and it's also on the label, so it'll say,
Now
that's the color number right there, and it's metallic. Okay, the color is right there. Nowhere. On the paper. See, the 8 is right there. Okay. Yeah.
no, it's 800 meters.
I'm sorry.
What I learned to do with my threads is with a thin magic marker, on the inside, I write the weight, and I'll write the color if I have to, or the make, because I can't remember,
Yeah.
and it really saves you a lot of hard work.
Well, I'm going to tell Wonderful that they need to put their weight on the end of their. It's everybody. Yeah. Okay, so that's the small. The smaller the number, the thicker the thread. And if you start with a 12-weight thread, the 12-weight thread is going to give you results far beyond. You may never even have to go to an 8-weight thread because of what you can do with that stitch, where you can shorten your stitch length, you can adjust the width of the stitch that's going to give you the look that you're wanting, okay? Now, let's talk about this morning when all of you were waiting in line out front to come in, right? The closer the time became, all of you got closer and closer together, right? Now, it could have been because you were cold, right? Could have been because you were cold. But what happens with decorative thread especially? So with decorative thread, when you're working with these heavier threads, you need to lengthen the stitch, okay? Your stitch needs to be longer. And if you put your stitches too close together, what happens, and I'm sure that happened in the line out front, somebody was getting a little too claustrophobic or like a little too close for comfort, and you kind of took a little step off to the side, okay? That happens exactly the same thing with your threads. So if your threads are pushing too close together, they're going to fall off the edge. And you're going to end up with loops that hang off the edge. All right? So then lengthen out your stitch just a little bit. Your threads will then lay very neatly side by side, and your loops will naturally snug to the edge of your fabric. It'll just naturally do that. Okay? So you can play with your length a little bit. The heavier your thread, the longer the stitch length needs to be. Okay? Now, let's talk about how much thread do you need? Okay? So, when you're working, and let's just, as an example, we're going to make you're going to run out at midnight, or you're going to do the thread chicken, and you're going to go, if I sew a little faster, maybe I'll be able to get through it. Right? Been there, done that. But now, here's what's going to happen. You need to, first of all, of course, it's going to depend on the width of your stitch, the length of your stitch, right? So we have to kind of take that out of the equation for just a minute. But let's say we're going to make 4 placemats, and we're going to measure around 1 placemat, and we determine that amount. All right, so we're going to make 4. So then we multiply that measurement by 4. That gives us our total number of inches, right? Then, or centimeters, okay? Then, what I typically do, your loopers will always use 7 to 8 times the amount of thread that your needle is going to use. Wow, yeah. Yeah, because your loopers per looper, okay? So if you're doing something that has an overlock stitch, a 3-thread overlock stitch like this, okay? You're doing a 3-thread overlock stitch, and you have 1 color thread in your lower looper and 1 color thread in your upper looper. So your loopers are going to use 7 or 8 times the amount of thread because your needle's running straight. Okay? And your loopers are going over the edge. All right? So then you come up with your inches, multiply by 7 or 8. I usually do 10. Okay? Because then you have, it's easier to calculate that way, number 1. And number 2, you have a little bit to play with, and you're not running out. I would much rather have a little bit of extra to put in my drawer than have to run over here and get this much more thread, right? All right, so that's kind of the rule of thumb that you want to work with. Now, of course, remember that you have varying widths of your stitch. So if you're doing a rolled hem with one decorative thread, because you only have to place it in your upper looper then, because that's the only thread that really shows, okay? Then you just need 1 spool of thread, okay? Now also, when you work with these different weights of threads, you have to kind of keep in mind or look at it in a way that they're kind of playing tug of war against each other, okay? The heavier thread is always going to win, right? The tug of war team that had the big guy on at the end, they always won, right? So by thinking about it that way, the heavy thread needs to have, it needs to be held back maybe a little bit, okay? Or the lighter one needs to give just a little bit more, okay?
How do you control that?
How do you control that? So on the Bernina machines, because you have total stitch control, you can adjust that. On the Baby Lock machines with automatic thread delivery, you have to place your threads in different slots that give you that different control, okay? So sometimes you may have to play with the position of your thread that affects the look of your stitch, okay? So let's then take a quick look at, so any questions on thread before we, yeah?
I want to make sure I understand this. In your quote paper,
Mm-hmm.
you're using decorative threads. They can be different weights.
Sure.
You just fiddle with the tension.
Yep. Yep. Or the position. Or the position.
Or you want to show it.
Huh?
Or you want to show the two colors on one side.
Exactly. Yeah. So it just depends on the way you want your stitch to look. Now, when we take a look at the different ways that you can create stitches, okay? As we mentioned, the automatic thread delivery, you move the thread to different positions to get a different amount of control, all right? And you play with your stitch selector lever, okay? So here we have a sample. You see that? Okay, so this is our basic 3-thread overlock stitch. And what I did is I placed the 2 different colored threads, one in the pink in the upper and the blue in the lower. Okay? There? Okay. The stitch, oh, the lights. Where are those? Okay, all right, there we go. All right.
Now you can't see it.
Got it? Is that,
Light on the camera? No.
Yeah, that's it.
can you see it there if I bring it under? Look, okay. So you have, this is a 9 millimeter wide width. Okay? So we looked at that yesterday, where you have the gold is 9 millimeters and the red is 7.5. Okay, so that's the widest width that the Baby Lock machines will do. So you have a difference in the width, all right? Now, you also have a way that you can adjust the stitch. So I know many of you have said, well, does your machine do a wave stitch? No, because that is a patented stitch, okay? So we can't use that stitch. However, with the total stitch control that we have, we can create different stitches. So this is that 9 millimeter wide stitch, and what I did is I played with the control of my thread, so now it wraps. Who's to say that the stitch always has to lay right along the edge? So now the stitch is wrapping to the front side, okay? Then I can take it a step farther and I can make that 2-color stitch a flat lock. Okay, so that's a flat lock 2-color stitch. So when I use this stitch in all 3 ways, the machine is threaded exactly the same way for each and every stitch. Okay? So I don't have to adjust the position of my thread. Okay?
So where do you adjust the fabric?
Nope. I adjust. Okay, so let me translate that to a Baby Lock. You would have to play with where you put your threads in different places to create different stitches. Okay? Different thread paths. In your, well, it depends. That's why there are 8 different positions for your threads. Okay? Because you have you have the different positions to place the threads in to create different amounts of control. Okay? Okay? So when you have an automatic thread delivery system, no, in threading your machine. So you know your thread chart? Okay, your thread chart? That's what that thread chart is telling you. It's telling you all those different places to put the threads. Okay? So here, when it's the... Right, you put it in your tension discs, but you might have to put your needle thread in an upper looper thread position look at your thread chart, in order to get a different type of stitch. Okay? So when you're on here, my threads, here we go. So I'll thread this up like we have it on our sample. So we're going to put our 12 weight blue thread in the lower looper. We're going to put our 12 weight pink thread in the upper looper. Okay. We're just going to step on that foot pedal, thread the 12 weight, and this is also another reason why you would want to use a 12 weight thread to start with, because it'll blow right through your machine very easily. Okay? Then, I guess I need a foot. The loopers.
Will it do any damage if you accidentally step on the heel part while you're sewing?
No.
It won't break if you accidentally lean on it.
No. So if you're this big knob, okay, this big knob, if it's engaged for threading, it'll thread. If it's open, it'll sew. Okay? All right. Now, we're just going to thread our needle, and I'm going to thread the left needle because I want the maximum width of my stitch. Okay? And does anybody see the standard presser foot that I took off? Now that it's in the dark. And I'm starting to... Oh, here it is. Found it. Thank you. All right, so we're just going to use the standard presser foot. And I'm going to take the right needle out. Now, sometimes the question also is asked, if I'm using just the left needle, should I take the right needle out, or vice versa? You want to have, if you're threading the right needle, you want to take the left needle out, because your looper will still travel over to the left needle, and you might end up with a very interesting looking stitch. So if you ever come up with an interesting looking stitch, always write down your settings before you take it apart. All right, so what I'm going to show you, can you see this?
Could you save it and name it?
Yep. Yes. On here you can save it and name it. So this is what I'm going to do for you. So this is our standard 3-thread overlock stitch. All I'm going to do is play with the little buttons on the front of my machine, and it will move my threads into a different position and look on the fabric.
Can you do it while you're sewing, or you have to...
While you're sewing. While you're sewing.
Create that wave.
Yes. If you wanted to create a wave, you could create a wave on and off. Okay? You would have to take it on and off. Yes.
You're talking about the bottom shoulder on the tension, right?
Yes. Yes. Now, what I have done is, and I saw another hand over here before. No? Okay. So what I'm going to do is first, the width of my stitch, I'm going to bring the width all the way out to the widest setting. This seam guide, I really don't need it right now. And as I start to stitch, I am going to hold on to my threads. Whenever you're working with a heavier thread or you're coming onto your fabric, it is best to hold on to that thread. Oh, and also let me, I'm bringing my stitch length down a little bit so it's more satiny. Okay, so it's a more satin stitch. Okay, so now as I stitch, it's a nice satiny stitch. See that? Can you see that? Yeah? Behind, right behind here. Okay? If I took my stitch and I'm going to make this look bad, I'm going to bring it way down. It's actually not looking too bad. Okay, but you can see how much closer together that stitch is going to be. Okay, now as I stitch this, this is the second line of stitch. Oh, let me lengthen my stitch just a little bit. Okay, so as I stitch this, then what I can do is play with the control, or I can just go into my memory and I can touch the memory and select the stitch, and it gives me that 2-color stitch. Okay?
Is it possible to program it to do every inch?
Right now you can't do that. You can't program it to do a certain amount, but so the machines also have software, so if new and different things become available, then updates could come. Can I talk to them to do that? Believe me, I've been talking. And what I always find absolutely fascinating with machines of any kind is that the engineers develop these machines from an engineering standpoint. They have no idea what they're doing, and they give it to someone who's creative, and we take it in all these different directions, and they're like, I never even thought you could do that with the machine. So honestly, the reason that BERNINA sergers have a 9mm width is because their sewing machines have a 9mm width. And the engineers said, well, 9mm, that's standard. That's what we do. We get it to the marketplace and nobody else has 9mm, right? So that is a big difference. Now, I want you to take a look then. So we've done those 2 stitches just by playing with the position. And let me take you over here to the screen. Okay? So what I've done is on the stitch, I have programmed it into memory, which is, can you see the little heart? That's right on there. And I labeled it twice as nice stitch. Okay, twice as nice, because it is, right? 2 colors are twice as nice as 1 color on each side. So all I did was I made an adjustment to the upper looper thread control and saved it. Okay? Now, take a picture of that. Okay?
So for the upper looper, you put like a less stitch or more?
More. Because what happened is the upper looper pulls the thread tighter and rolls it around the top edge. Okay? When we have a stitch sometimes we might look at this stitch as, well, that's not right, right? But if we use this on a sample or we use it for a decorative application around the outside of a placemat, or you could use this as a binding on a quilt, and when you stitch it and then wrap the edge over, it looks like a piping, dark, then it would look like a piping along with another color of stitching that's already been made. Okay? How do you make it on the flat lock? Okay, so let's then, looking at, I'm going to go back to the screen here for just a minute. So, yeah?
Which side is became right side or on the back side?
For the two color,
Yes.
the top side. So on sample here,
If I wanted to show, I have to use it on the right side of the fabric.
you put your fabric right side up. Yes. So if you're wanting the two colors of thread to show, you have the right side of your fabric facing up, just like you would a wave stitch. Okay? All right. Now then, when we do this as a flat lock stitch, except I did not save that one. Oh, my microphone? Oh, did it die? Are there batteries under here?
Not under here, no.
Bless you. Okay. Okay, so let me show you a couple of samples while,
Pam,
yeah,
have a moment.
sure.
Did anybody lose their cell phone?
Check your phone.
Got sparkly silver on the back and a little blue down.
You look in the phone book under ICT. In case of emergency. No, I had mine.
Yeah, but
They'll realize it.
can you open it? I don't have.
Sorry.
Probably not.
No, you're fine.
I didn't even know where to go because my son is. I fast. I do too, but it's an 8, so I've got a button there.
I know, I'm not going to have the car.
I made that bag.
Yeah.
Oh my. That was a masterpiece.
So this bag, oh, did you have batteries?
Yeah.
Right to the rescue.
Right to the rescue.
Yeah, I meant to do it between sessions, and then I never got a chance to, and
You're busy selling machines.
I knew that it was going to run out.
Okay, we're back in action. Yay! Yay, bread! And the last day, and I finally wore something I could clip the microphone on in the right place. Okay, so what we did with the flat lock stitch, and when we look at this bag here, okay, so the orange and pink lines are that two-color flat lock stitch, and the other line is just a cover stitch. Okay, it's a simple cover stitch with a chain stitch through the middle. Okay, now the way that flat lock stitch is done is, again, all we're going to need to do is fold our fabric like you're doing a flat lock. I don't have to rethread my machine. Let me do a different piece of fabric here so it's not too close to the edge. So we're just going to fold our fabric using the exact same stitch. No other threading has to take place. And you just stitch. Now it's going to look very similar to, the two-color stitch until, let me just run off, until I take the fabric piece and I pull on this. When I pull on this, then the stitch opens up and it lays flat. Okay? So then you have those two colors of stitching on your fabric. Now, if you're ever doing a flat lock stitch and it doesn't pull apart real flat, hold the outside edge of the stitch and wiggle it and roll your hands like you're hand washing something. Okay? So if you hold it and kind of roll it like you're hand washing, it's going to massage those threads so that they open up and lay flat. Okay?
Basically same setting but with full apple.
Yes.
3494.
So the settings for this one, so we've taken our needle control and we've placed it way down to 2, and then the upper looper and lower looper are about the same, okay, balanced out. The upper's a little higher, so it pulls that top thread, the lower thread over to create that other stitch. Okay? So, you can create your own stitches if you want to. Now, some of you, again, have asked about the wave type of stitch, so I'm going to have them look at the screen here. So can you see on this purple stitch how it creates a scallop? Okay, it creates this scallop. And the way that that scallop is created is by setting your machine for a rolled hem stitch, and on our needle plate, our rolled hem lever is here on the top. So all I have to do is pull that lever backward and forward, and that's what creates the little scallop on the edge of your fabric. Okay? So the rolled hem, come back over to the screen. Okay, see how it has a little rolled hem right here, and then it widens out. And that stitch is shown in the big book of serging. Yeah? Yes, you pull the lever while you're sewing. So you have to have a little rhythm, okay, when you do this. Set up your metronome, put on a nice tune or something, and then you're just sliding that lever back and forth as you're sewing, okay? And it creates that scalloped stitch. Yeah?
Can you talk a little bit about rolled hem at some point?
Yeah, what?
Just the ways you like to set it up and advantages or disadvantages of too tight or too.
So, were you here yesterday?
I was.
You were. So, yesterday, I had a sample here that we looked at the rolled hem where you ended up with those little pokies.
I wasn't in that.
You weren't in that session. I'll see if I can find them. But yesterday, when we were looking at a rolled hem, sometimes you end up with a stitch that has like little fibers that come through the stitch. Okay? The way that you can correct that is by widening out the cutting width. Okay, just make the width a little bit wider, and it's going to roll a little bit more of the edge of your fabric in, and that will give you a much prettier rolled hem. You can also, when you work with a rolled hem, you can also place that clear plastic stabilizer on top, and that helps roll in. But then once it washes out or it presses away, whoop, you're going to still get those little fibers. Okay? And it was also better to do your rolled hem on the lengthwise grain than on the crosswise grain. Okay?
Clear plastic stabilizer.
This one is I don't know exactly. It might be, is there a decorative stitch category? No? Are you looking in the big book of serging or Serger quilting? Nope, it's not in that one. It's in serging, big book of serging, yeah.
You buy that separately?
Yeah.
And it comes with the
So there's two different books. You have the big book of serging and you have the big book of Serger quilting. So big book of serging is going to go more into the serger basic knowledge and things like that. And then obviously the quilting is more quilting specific. No. Yeah? Okay, so the green one, so the picture with the green stitching, there is a narrow cover stitch right on top. So when we stitched it, we cheated, I'll tell you that. We did looking at the right stitch first, so we would take the zipper and slide it underneath the little scallop stitch, and then with our straight stitch on the sewing machine, we straight stitched the zipper in place. Okay? The reason you do that is because when you sew your narrow cover stitch, you have to sew upside down. Okay? And if you don't have a line to follow, you're kind of sewing blind. Right. And there's the zipper is in between there and you can't really see it. So sew it on first, then flip it over and sew it in place.
So the single stitch, which one do you follow when you flip it over? The left side?
I usually follow the kind of try and straddle it. Okay. If you're doing this with a wave stitch, you just sew your zipper on like Pam showed you. Okay.
How do you deal with the puller and the little tab on the back? Let's say
you have to make it longer. So anytime you put a zipper in, and Pam, did you talk about this? Oh no, because you do zippers by the yard. So the first thing, I would do zipper by the yard because it's so much easier, and then you slide your tab on your garment. So what you would want to do is you would have to slide your tab down or up, sew up to it, stop, and then keeping your needle down holding your fabric in place, unzip your zipper, also use your narrow foot. If you're wanting to bypass around that zipper pull that's there, and the tab at the bottom. If you're doing a separating. This cover stitch is 2 needles, and the scallop stitch is 1 because it's a rolled hem. Okay? All right, let's move on then and talk a little bit about till 3 o'clock. Okay, so let's take a look then at the stitch that everybody has been looking at, which is this fringe stitch. Okay? You see the stitch, this fringe that's on the pillow. We'll pass that around. On this little Christmas tree, isn't that the cutest? Okay? That fringe is made with your 2-thread wrap stitch. Okay? So when you do that, and here's an example that Lisa has done. So this is the fringe stitch wrap using the wrap stitch, and this is blending together 3 different threads. Did you use 3? Oh, Lisa, did you use 2 or 3 threads in? 2. 2 threads in here, a variegated and a solid. Any of them. Any of them. Yeah. Okay. So there's only 1 looper thread that you're using here, because this is a wrap stitch. So it's a 2-thread wrap stitch that we're doing. Okay? On your baby locks, you can do a fringe, but you're using a 3-thread stitch, and it's only that wide. Okay?
And when you say only 1 looper you use, which one do you use, the up, the lower?
Lower. And right here on our machine, it would show us that. So when we would pull up the stitch, what we're doing is we are using the 9mm wide width of stitch. Okay? We're going to use the MTC, which is the micro thread control, and it's going to pull the edge of our thread over the edge. So see how this thread is on the top, but it also wraps around to the underside. Okay? Upper,
MTC which way?
up, plus 2. Okay, so this is 3 threads. This is 3 different threads placed into the single lower looper. Okay? All right. Now I'm going to show you the sequence, and then we're going to sew it. Okay? So we have 3 threads in our lower looper.
And you can do that on the baby locks as well.
You have to use the 3-thread overlock stitch. This is going to be a 2-thread flat lock stitch, okay? Because there isn't any way to wrap the edge, okay? So here we have 2-thread wrap stitch. We sew with the right side of our fabric facing up, and then you're going to take this, and let me make sure, yes. Then you're going to take this to your sewing machine, and it's a little hard to see on there, but you have a teeny little zigzag that you are zigzagging over the needle thread. So if I'm doing it for real, my needle thread, my zigzag all match. But here, I want you to see the needle thread and the zigzag stitch. So then after I have that all stitched and the little teeny zigzag, then I'm going to take my little scissors. I like the little Havel scissors. I had them right here. Anybody see them on the table? Well, oh, here, they fell on the floor when the, all right. So now I'm going to take, and Roz, if you can you get in real close there? What I'm going to do is take my scissors and I'm going to slide it underneath that needle thread. Is it best? Okay, can you see it that way? All right, so I'm going to take my scissors and slide it in that needle thread and just cut the needle thread, okay, all the way across, and then you shake it and press it, and that's where you get that really pretty fringe. Okay? So it's not hard to do. It's not hard to do at all. You're just using the whatever color threads that you want. You have to make sure that you are zigzagging and securing that needle thread, which is the looper threads. Yeah?
And does it automatically do this zigzagging?
No, you do it on your sewing machine. Yeah. Remember, we have to show our sewing machine a little love every now and again. Okay.
It's a new machine.
I'm sorry?
We do this on Serger, and then we
Go to our sewing machine. Yep. We do this stitch. We do this stitch on our serger. We go to the sewing machine and we do the little zigzag stitch. Okay.
the machine thread, the serger,
You're gonna cut the serger needle thread.
So the zigzag that you've done with your sewing machine,
Holds the stitches in place.
and it won't interfere with cutting.
No, because when I flip this over, Roz, if you can get in kind of close on that. Can you see the black thread? That's right there. That's the thread you're cutting. Okay? That's the thread you're cutting. And it is a good idea to have it a different color so you can see it, so it doesn't blend in with your fabric. Yeah. Okay? All right, now how do we do that? How do we get all those threads into our machine, and how do we form that stitch? So again, we're using the 2-thread wrap stitch that's on the machine. We're going to leave our cutting blade engaged. I'm going to just cut my looper threads and pull those out because I want to show you how you get those other colored threads in. Come on down here to the...
Okay, she wanted a picture of that.
Oh, she wanted a picture of that. Okay. All right. So now what we're going to do... Oops, I don't want that. We are going to take a long piece of regular serger thread. Now, somebody asked me earlier, doesn't this machine come with one of those little threading wires? Yes, it does, but don't use it. Okay? That little threading wire is really designed for when you need to kind of clean out the looper tubes. The little wire threader that's at the end, if you put thread that's too heavy, it'll actually break it. It'll pull it out, or it'll break it off. Okay? So we're just going to take a really long piece of thread, and we're making a big long loop. Okay? See that? Now, keep your finger in that loop, otherwise it'll blow the thread all the way through the machine. And on here, we're going to use the lower looper, and we're just going to engage for threading, blow that thread all the way through. So now you have a loop on one end, and you have the handle, I'll call it, on the other end. Okay? Now, I am going to use, I'll use the same threads if I brought them over. Okay? Oh yeah, okay, so we have, I'm going to use this little thread fusion disc. Okay? This is a way that we can use multiple threads and blend them all together. And this is where we could use 5 spools of embroidery thread. So if you look at this skirt that's going to come around, this is a cover stitch, but it has 5 embroidery threads that were all fed through exactly this same way. Okay? So if you have some decorative, or you have embroidery threads, sometimes you want to have threads that are that change color, but not variegated. Does that make sense? Okay. So when you thread this, you're going to thread all the threads up through your machine like it's one thread, and that's what this little disc does. I'm going to put the blue one in because I don't know where the other one is. Yeah, it's universal. Yep, it fits on all the machines. Okay.
What is the name for that?
Thread Fusion.
I think Gail Yellen.
Yep.
The one that developed.
So then you're just going to snap this into your snapping thread guide just like it is one thread, and then you place all of the threads together through that little loop, and then you pull, and it will pull all of those threads through at one time. Okay? Okay? Well, you can use this. It doesn't have to be, you don't only use this technique for fringe. You could use it for really anything. Okay? All right?
Did you sew your beads on by hand? On this?
Yeah. Yeah. So here's an example of thread blending. It's a chain stitch, but this is an example of thread blending. Do you see the red, white, and blue thread that's on here? Okay. And it looks stripy, red, white, blue. And it's cute there on the front with all of those other threads. Kind of looks like fireworks, right? But then on the back side, when I take the same red, white, and blue thread in the chain stitch and add a red thread along with it, you see just little pricks of that color, and the red softens the color change in your thread.
So on the back where it goes red, white, blue, in order to make that
one spool of thread.
That's variegated.
Yep.
Okay.
Multicolored. Now, also, they have a great selection of the sulky blendable thread, which has a very, very nice color change. Okay, on that fringy pillow that's coming around, the background color thread that's on there is actually the sulky thread that is the blendable. Thank you. Yes, this one just has the red, white, and blue with red thread along with it. Okay.
Did you use the 30 weight or the 12?
12. So that's two 12 weights. But what you can do is maybe sometimes you have a 30 weight thread that you want to add a little bit of thickness to it. There isn't any reason why you couldn't put two 30 weight threads together through your looper and fill in that stitch a little bit more. Okay? So that blending of the thread is not just for fringe or not just for making but it is for making your threads even thicker if you have thinner weight threads that you're wanting to put together. Yeah?
If you use 2, 3, 4 different threads, do you need to change the needle because
They're in the looper. They're in the looper.
lower looper, right?
Yes, or in the loopers. Right. Okay, they're in the loopers. Here's another one, and so again, you can use either side. So this kind of is your question about do you have to change the size of your needle? So on this bag, the straight lines are a 12 weight thread, probably a size 14 needle. And the chain looper has the variegated black and white with a white thread. So when I stitch this, the width of the presser foot apart to make the fabric, it is sewing one side face up, the next line face down. So it's just flipping the fabric top to bottom. Okay? To give you that. Okay? So you have that.
Bezel bit was put on your machine too?
No. Those were all done by hand. The little crystals, yeah, those were put on by hand. And they're rivets. Because they're rivets because that faux leather, if you put heat on it, it'll melt.
Right.
Yeah, so you want to use rivets for that. Okay? All right, so everybody kind of clear on the fringe and blending your threads. Okay, other questions on that? Okay, so I'm going to take this thread.
Same thing.
Say that again.
On the baby lock,
Yeah?
just the 3-thread overlock,
Yes.
and then just do the same thing with the
Yep. Yeah, you have to secure your needle thread. You have to secure your needle thread. Otherwise, if you clip your looper thread or that needle thread, your loops are going to just fall right off the edge. Okay? Then you're going to wind your thread back on and start all over again. So if you're doing fringe,
No, not for fringe, just for decorative stitch.
depends what kind of decorative stitch you're doing. So if you're using we'll do it this way. If you're doing a 3-thread overlock stitch, you may want to put it, and it's wide, you will want to put decorative thread in both your upper and your lower looper. Okay? If you're doing a rolled hem, you would put your decorative thread in only the upper looper. Okay?
I'm talking about multiple threads. That's the same as the blendables.
The blendables, again, it depends on what stitch you're doing. So if you're doing a fringe and you have the wrap stitch capability, that's only 2 threads, and it's your needle and it's your lower looper. So your decorative thread's in the lower looper. If your machine doesn't have the wrap stitch capabilities, then you have to use 3 threads. So your needle thread would be regular thread, your lower looper thread would be regular thread, and your upper looper thread would be decorative. Okay? Yeah. Okay. So we're going to do a flat lock stitch, and I'm going to show you 3 different ways to do a flat lock or use that flat lock setup. And we are going to use a top stitching needle. Okay?
And do you ever use blanket stitch?
Yes. So I'm going to show you the blanket stitch right now. So I am going to use a top stitching needle for this. Don't look, she says. Don't look.
I know her.
Did you tell her that?
We always bring our credit cards.
You bring. But you do know that. Friends let friends buy sewing machines. Friends let friends buy sewing machines. Okay, so what I'm going to do is put decorative thread in my needle this time. Okay? So I'm going to use the 12-weight thread in the needle. And you know that cute little lasso that I made earlier? I'm just going to cut it really short. I'm going to do a blanket and a teardrop and a flat lock, reverse flat lock. So I can thread even an 8-weight thread. I can thread through my top stitching needle. Okay. If I can get it through the needle. I didn't bring my glasses out.
You're making me feel better anyway. Would you like a pair?
Am I making you feel better?
You have to cut it because it's
I have 2 threads that I'm trying to get through there. Ah, there we go. All right, so now I have a loop. So I had 2 threads that I was Does that make you feel better? Yes. That I couldn't get it? All right, so I have those 2 threads. I have a loop. I put the thread through that loop and pull it. Okay? So Gail Yellen and I are working on a bunch of different serger notions and accessories. So we come up with them and then she comes out with them, which is fine. But then we want to come up with a decorative serger needle threader. So because it has to really come from the back, okay? And you could thread a needle threader from the back, put it in and pull it straight back. Okay, you can do that too. And then we're going to put, this is just a 2-thread flat lock stitch. So we're putting our regular thread in the lower looper, and our upper looper is blocked by the upper looper converter, or called a subsidiary looper. Okay, so it's just a 2-thread stitch. Now, if I'm doing a traditional reverse flat lock stitch, and let me just touch on the screen the flat lock, which is number 11, 2-thread flat lock. Okay, and I'm going to take, let me just take this fabric, and I'm going to put right.
Oh, did you want to pick?
Will you make any more changes to that?
Now. Okay. Now, a lot of times people will say, do you put your cutting blade up or down when you're doing this decorative stitching? And if I'm sewing on a folded edge, I always leave my cutting blade up, because with a serger, you train your eye to watch the position of the cutting blade, not the needle, because it always cuts before it sews. So I'm going to watch the position of my cutting blade, and now as I stitch, I'm going to put right sides together. So when you sew what's called a reverse flat lock stitch, you sew with your right sides together, then you simply pull on the stitch and it opens up and it lays flat. Okay? Easy peasy, right? You've done that 100 times. So you can also take that same reverse flat lock. Look at that. Wow, look at that. Isn't that cute? Isn't that something? Here it is again. How did you do that? Okay, so.
Are you sewing from the wrong side with that?
No, I sew on the right side. So I put right sides of my fabric together when I want to have these ladders to show. And I have my decorative thread in the needle. Okay? Now this whole project, this whole little project here, you can find on quiltstreet.com. Okay? It's a free project. Download it. And you can do that on your serger. So we're doing a reverse flat lock stitch here. And then we're going to take a heavy thread and we're going to slide it underneath the ladders and then wrap it around, slide it back under, and pull it tight. Okay? So, oh, she's like, oh, it's handwork. Yeah. No, I know. But I do know that hand is a 4-letter word to some people. Okay? But you know what this does is it takes your flat lock from looking blah and ordinary to, oh wow, right? Okay? Now again, you wouldn't probably do this on a huge project, but I have done it when I've done a flat lock quilt and pieced my quilt block together. I've done it on a midriff. I did the same dress, but I did it in the midriff section of this dress. Okay, this is not flat lock, but the same dress. So you can do it in different places and get interesting looks. How cute would it be to do this weaving and then put a little bead every so often, right? So you can take your projects to a whole nother level than what typically people think about sergers as, oh, it finishes seams, right? And a lot of times we all purchased our very first sergers because that's what it did. But now, again, give any creative person a machine of any kind with some decorative threads. Whew, you never know what you're going to come in contact with. Yeah. So so every 2 or 3 stitches, you take your, here it is. So you can use one of these bodkins. I would use the small one, thread a heavy thread into it, and then you slide it underneath the ladders and wrap it back around, slide it under, and pull it tight.
Oh, so you aren't going through the fabric, you're just going
No.
around the stitches.
Just around the stitches.
Kind of like you're crocheting it.
Absolutely.
You could use a yarn needle.
You could use a yarn needle. Yeah. You could put ribbon. And yes, you could, so that same reverse flat lock stitch, see the, what looks like a basket weave on this project? Okay? That's the same stitch, but running a ribbon through it. Okay? Okay? And because you have a wider stitch capability, you can run the ribbons side by side. Okay? On some of the stitches, if they're not wide enough, you can't run 2 ribbons side by side. Okay? Now, this is a fantastic little project for you to experiment with different techniques. This is a pattern that's out there on that same spinner rack where the decorative Pro Crown rayon thread is at the top. These are all on the side. And this project, you make the different little blocks. So you're trying a technique. You save the little blocks, and then you make windows and insert those techniques behind the little windows. Okay? And then you have, this one is made a little laptop bag. But you could do it for whatever kind of technique. But you can make...
These are my favorite threaders. So it's a needle that has a needle point on either end, and it's one big eye down the middle.
For weaving in ends. Or, so you could use something like that. Yeah. Oh, those are very nice.
Yeah, those are my favorite.
Those are your favorites. We all have our favorite stuff, right? Okay. Yeah? Yes, question.
The recipe for how you did that, I'm supposed to say it looked a little bit like fireflies. It was an X with a line through it.
Oh, yeah. This one?
Yeah.
So that's what we were just talking about. So you take the heavy yarn, or excuse me, thread, and I only used a single thread, and you slide it underneath the number of ladders. Here it's 2, here it's 3, so you see the difference.
Okay, it says a different color. It threw me.
Yeah.
So that's okay.
So then you just wrap it around and pull it tight. Okay? And that's what makes that little loop. You can do the same. You can do the same thing. We looked at this the other day with the quilting, where there we wove ribbons through an overlock stitch. This is weaving the ribbons through a narrow cover stitch. Okay? So this narrow cover stitch then takes on again a whole different look because it's a different kind of stitch. Yeah. So the holes, the light's coming through the quilting that's there.
And each time you make one of those lines, do you have to bend the fabric?
No, this one, the fabric is not bent.
How do you make it like this? The whole, it's a cover fabric.
Right, so when I did this kind of stitching, I would use my cover stitch and I would use a seam guide. So I would draw the first line of stitching so I knew where I wanted it to be positioned, and then I would slide my seam guide in, and I could use either the width of my presser foot or this seam guide to guide the next lines of stitching.
So you take out the blade.
Yeah, so this would be then, those are very tight in there. So I would set this up for a cover stitch. Okay, my blade is down, my upper looper is down. I would take my table. Yep, I'm going to show you that. So now when you have like 10 minutes, I'll show you this and then I'll turn you loose. Okay? Yeah, tomorrow, 8 o'clock, tomorrow morning.
Where are you flying to?
I'm flying home for 2 days. I live in Houston, Texas, where it's flooding right now. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to I'm going to do a narrow cover stitch, and I'm just placing my regular threads in the needles. Okay, and all of my threading takes place right here on the front of the machine. Okay. And I'll move the needle from the overlock sewing position to the cover stitch. Thread the looper, pick the stitch, and then I'm ready to go. Okay. Goodbye, Miss Lynn. You're welcome. Good to see you. Good to see you again.
Do you need to tighten the screw when the needle is not in place?
Yeah.
Otherwise it might get loose.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like on the first one. I don't have to do it in times.
Yeah.
Needle cradle looks very similar.
The what?
The needle, the metal that you're screwing it into looks
all
very
right.
similar to.
Your needles are all the same distance apart.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. On all sergers, your needle distance is the same. It's the position of the needle bar with the presser foot that makes a difference on where the presser foot snaps on. Okay.
What positions are those two needles?
Right now I have them in a cover stitch center and right. Okay. You could use center and left. You could also use wide, being left and right position. Okay? Or all three. Oh, thread.
And there's a, I can't remember the maker, but there's a type of serger that does, you know how the cover stitch looks?
Top and bottom cover stitch. Janome and Brother right now are the ones that do that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so cover stitch, basic cover stitching, you have the table placed on, and I'll just do a line of stitching. Now, when I do a basic hem, I fold my fabric up the distance I want my hem, then I lay it in upside down just to see where I'm going to guide. And then I take my fabric and I flip it over. Okay? Yeah. Well, sure you can. You could pin it if you wanted to, but you don't want to sew over pins. Right? I mean, really, you don't want to sew over the pins when you do this. Oops, I want a narrow cover stitch. All right, so I'm just going to pick my stitch. My cutting blade is down. It shows that on the screen. It's automatically set the length of my stitch for me. All right, and now I'm just going to stitch. So when I'm stitching with regular thread in the chain looper on the reverse side, I get just the basic stitch, right? Okay. There you go. Okay. So that just is the basic cover stitch hem that you do. So then, if I'm going to be stitching with the decorative thread, oh, scissors. Did they fall again? I should put one on my neck. Okay, so we just pull this extra thread out. We're going to put the other thread in. Okay, and you notice that I have, make sure my thread is out. There we go. And ladies, when you, no matter what machine it is, when you blow the thread through, you want to, and you'll notice here, it comes right out in the sewing area. And you want to make sure that you have a long enough thread that the stitch will pick it up. When you're sewing on a cover stitch, it will not form a stitch by itself unless you start on fabric. You have to start on fabric. It will chain off, but it will not start without fabric. Okay, so I'm going to show you the binder, and we're going to take the edge of your fabric and you're going to cut, looking at the wrong side of your fabric, you're going to cut down into the corner, and when you load your fabric into the binder, can you see that there? We're going to take the fabric, slide it in, okay, and use either your Allen wrench or your tweezers and slide it through. Okay? Oop. That was attached. All right. Now, with this one, I can swing it back and forth. Okay? So I could load my binding, get it positioned, then slide it under the presser foot, whether I'm using the standard foot or the cover stitch foot, and I can leave this binder attached to the table. Okay? Now, as I stitch this, those little pieces of, okay, so now as I stitch this, this one is the double fold binder. There we go. Okay, double fold binder. I'm going to show you. Now, So now when you stitch, I'm adding that fabric edge to my the fabric to the edge. But now as you're stitching,
What you're supposed to look at, because right now I see the second needle is in and out. So which one will?
now you can adjust this binder. You can adjust this binder so you see both threads on top. You can adjust the binder so you have one that stitches in the ditch. Okay, however you want to see it. But what you can do is also use that binder, and we looked at this yesterday also, where I added the binding around the bottom edge of this skirt. And when I attached it, I stitched it with the wrong side of the fabric, skirt fabric, facing up. So it's decorative, just like you see here. So on the back side, I have that decorative stitch. Okay? So you could use that decorative stitch on, if you're attaching a trim around the edge of a t-shirt. You could use that, sew your t-shirt upside down. So then you have that decorative stitch to show on the right side. Okay? Okay?
Exclusive to BERNINA?
No. Okay. This is your cover stitch. This is your regular cover stitch. If you're making an apron, you can just use this tail and continue stitching, and you now have the strap for around your neck, or you have the ties for the back. Okay? And it makes it so easy, so simple, so easy.
Thing attaches to your table?
Yes. The binder thing attaches to your table. You're sewing.
I've never seen it.
Now, this part, but you have to have a machine that does a cover or chain stitch.
I have the ovation.
Yes. Okay?
This is why it has holes in that label.
Right.
It sits in its bag most of the time.
The machine does?
Yeah.
Oh.
I know.
Show it some love. Show it some love. Okay, I'm going to take off this binder.
I need to get another job just so I can buy all the attachments online.
Okay? Yes, there are two sizes.
With the quilt edition of the machine?
No. Yeah, no. You mean the binder I just showed? Yeah, that it doesn't. And the reason why is the only things that I put. Do we have a flathead screwdriver somewhere? A dime. So no, quarter will be too big. So the reason I didn't put the binder in with the quilter's edition is because quilters would not be happy with how the corners are turned on a quilt, right? And oh, that's too big. A dime? Anybody have a dime? Let's see. Okay. Okay, we do need a screwdriver. I'll go get a screwdriver, or we'll get a screwdriver. It's an Allen wrench. Oh, look at you, all those handy tools. Oh. Now you got to figure out which one. Let me just go get a screwdriver. It's too big. It's too big. Okay, I'll be right back. Screwdriver's on there. Okay. kind of like, let's make a deal.
We're all trying to fix things.
All right. Yay. All right, I'm going to knead it for just a sec. Now this is called a belt loop binder.
My embroidery machine is sit on top of a toolbox. It does have a multi-drawer toolbox that it sits on. Really?
Okay. So we're going to get this lined up. You're going to use a wide cover stitch, and you're going to cut a strip of fabric that's 1 inch wide. You can use this for I'll just set it right here. Okay. Okay. You're going to use a wide cover stitch. You're going to use a strip of fabric that's 1 inch wide. Okay. Cover stitch, strip of fabric 1 inch wide, and you can use, if you want to make your strip fusible, you would put decorative thread, a fusible thread in your chain looper. Okay? So I'm just moving my needle over to the wide cover stitch position. And when you, my scissors again.
Where do you put the fusible thread?
In your chain looper. Chain looper. All right. Now when you cut, okay, when you cut the end of your fabric, you want to cut it like an arrow. Okay? Cut it like an arrow. So that as this slides in, it's going to pick up the left and the right side. And look at when I can slide my foot out of the way. Woohoo! Now I can grab onto that and slide it underneath the foot. And then all I do is stitch. And I have a wide cover stitch. All right, there we go. And as you stitch this, it's going to fold the left and the right side of the fabric. Now what I can do, we're using that wide cover stitch, and I can fine tune the position of that binder, the belt loop binder, using the width knob because it's attached to that table. So can you see how it's moving just a little bit? So you can fine tune that. Your cutting blade is not there, but it is allowing you to move that binder left and right to the position you want it to be in. So now you have this strap that's made that you could make it fusible. You could use it decoratively. You could use it as a handle. You can use it for, you could slide a piece of elastic underneath. If this is a swimwear, there we go. That's the word I'm looking for. If it's a swimwear, you can slide an elastic under there and make it stretchy as well. Okay? Underneath that strip of fabric. And the wide belt loop binder, you can also use the heavier shape flex, slide it under so you can make a handle for a bag. And it wraps the fabric right around that shape flex. Okay? All right. Okay, I gotta go. I could talk to you all day long, but Lots and lots of things you can do with your sergers. So, yeah, let us know if you need any additional help or questions. You can always reach me. Just email at BERNINA USA and I'll answer your questions. Okay? This is called a belt loop binder. P. Yeah, one is a double fold binder, and the other is a belt loop folder or binder. Yeah. P. Mahshie, MAHSHIE at BERNINAUSA.com.